Thank you for watching this informational video about the 2026 D2R Masters and Doctoral Scholar Awards. In today's video, I'll describe to you a little bit of an introduction to what the D2R initiative is, and additionally describe not only the 2026 Masters and Doctoral Scholar Awards and the training program, but additionally provide you some guidance on preparing your actual application for the program if you're interested to apply. And so while today I'll provide and start with a brief introduction about D2R, I do suggest that if you're interested in applying, you check out www.mcgill.ca/D2R, where you can learn a lot more about the D2R initiative and what type of research D2R is finding, and even information about last year's awarded D2R Masters and Doctoral Scholars. So what D2R is an inclusive Canadian approach to genomic-based RNA therapeutics. And so this initiative based here at McGill, working with several partner institutions, which I'll discuss later, has received $165 million from a Government of Canada program called the Canada First Research Excellence Fund. And so this program is really designed to improve and build on strengths that are already at universities across Canada. So in terms of D2R, this funding is helping McGill and the partner institutions become even stronger in the fields of genomics, RNA chemistry, and RNA biology, where there were already strengths here. And so this funding goes until 2030. And so D2R's mission is to develop an internationally leading initiative in the discovery and development of genome-guided RNA-based precision medicines, associated computational tools, and a clinical accelerator to ensure the application of the discoveries within the initiative for all Canadians and for the world. And so this is basically what this means is D2R is fostering a community and funding research to lead to the development of RNA-based precision medicines, as well as ensuring that the researchers on these programs have access to the computational tools, as well as an environment to collaborate with clinicians to actually bring their findings to the clinic. And so if you see on the right here, D2R's research is really focused in three priority disease areas. So these priority disease areas are those that were specifically chosen for not only expertise at McGill and the partner institutions, but also because they are well suited to the tailorability that's enabled by RNA therapeutics. And so those three priority disease areas are infectious diseases, precision cancer therapy, and rare diseases. And when in D2R's mission, you see that it's for all Canadians, what this means is that D2R is not only championing Indigenous-led research with our Indigenous partners, but also ensuring that equity, diversity, and inclusion considerations are at the core of not only the workshops and trainings that D2R is doing, but every project that D2R is funding. And so just a brief look, again, I suggest you take a look at the D2R website to get a better idea of what research D2R is currently funding to identify if your research project is a good fit. But this is a broad outline of the interdisciplinary research framework that D2R is funding research within. And so in those three priority disease areas that I mentioned, so infectious disease, rare disease, and precision cancer therapy, kind of the first stage of research when trying to develop an RNA therapeutic within these disease areas are discovering the actual biomarker and target that you're going to be trying to target with your therapeutic or use as a diagnostic marker for your cancer, for example. And so after the target identification comes target prioritization, and then design of the RNA vaccine or drug candidate development. And then building on that often chemical research there is the more engineering side or bioprocessing side or delivery side through synthesis, bioprocessing, and delivery step. And finally, once you kind of have your therapeutic, it's the time for the preclinical testing and the clinical acceleration before therapy implementation that will benefit all Canadians and the world. And so D2R is funding research that not only fits into each one of these steps, and I'll go into on the next slide a little detail about how you can frame your project within the context of D2R's research framework. So it's funding, for example, chemistry research that falls into the drug candidate development, genomic research that's discovering biomarkers, or bioengineering research that's looking at lipid nanoparticle delivery, for example. We're also at D2R funding projects that kind of start at one end. So these are the larger scale translational impact research projects start at one end of this framework, and hopefully by the end of the D2R initiative, make it all the way to the clinic. In addition to this central kind of linear framework, there are elements that D2R is really trying to build into these funded projects that kind of sit at every stage of the process. And these include incorporation of policy and social determinants of health considerations, as well as improved data science practices and the supporting of high throughput and other core research facilities to enable the projects that D2R is funding to succeed. And so, as I've outlined, D2R has not only three priority disease areas, being infectious disease, precision oncology, and rare disease, but also the research framework that was shown on the previous slide in order for you to better communicate where your research fits within D2R is broken into six foundational axes. And so these foundational axes are population studies in genomic medicine, RNA therapeutics, bioprocessing, biomanufacturing, and nanotechnology, clinical research, acceleration, and implementation, then the more data science, Axis 5, including bioinformatics and statistics, and then Axis 6 is the ethical, socioeconomic, and cultural dimensions in genomic research. So through the Scholar Awards, specifically as we're discussing today, the Master's and Doctoral Scholar Awards, we are looking for research that fits within D2R's priority disease areas and aligns with at least one of the foundational axes. So it is a requirement for your proposed research project to be aligned with D2R's objectives as a whole and within a priority disease area and at least one foundational axis. And I'll get into this when I describe the elements of the applications in a few minutes, but it is your job as an applicant to communicate to the evaluators and the reviewers where your research best fits within a foundational axis, or if you feel like it aligns with more than one axis. For example, your research might align with RNA therapeutics, but you're not only making a therapeutic, but you're working on the delivery, so it might be aligned with Axis 2 and Axis 3. And so I suggest, again, you look at the D2R website where each of these axes are outlined in a little more detail, as well as reach out to us through mechanisms that I'll describe a little later on if you have any questions. But if you're concerned, for example, if your research truly aligns with the priority disease area, let's say you're coming from a more chemistry perspective and you're working on, let's say, a new strategy to synthesize mRNA in the lab, and you're not sure if it aligns with the priority disease area, while it definitely can, for example, align with the RNA therapeutics axis, it's important for you to communicate to the evaluators which type of therapeutic you feel is best suited to the methods that you're developing to situate it and try to convince the reviewer that you're situating your research within a priority disease area. And so now that I've kind of started bridging towards describing the D2R Scholar Awards on that last slide, I'll now provide some more hard facts on what is involved in this competition. And so how does D2R support trainees? D2R supports and trains graduate students and postdoctoral trainees working on D2R aligned research projects because this is an essential step to ensure the long-term impact and sustainability of the D2R initiative. And so when we speak about supporting trainees, we're doing this through two main mechanisms. One is financial support, and two is through developmental and training support through the D2R Training Program. And so in terms of financial support, there are two mechanisms that we're currently using to distribute financial support to trainees. One of those is through training awards that are housed within D2R grants. So these are grants held at the principal investigator or professor level. And so trainees on these projects can be funded, their stipends or their salaries in the case of a postdoc can be funded by D2R funds. And these are some examples of projects that this happens through our foundational and research in motion projects and translational impact research projects. And so it could be the case that currently your working on a D2R funded project, and your salary is being funded by D2R. And so the second kind of stream here are the D2R Scholar Awards, which we're talking about today. And so the D2R Scholar Awards are the highest recognition available to D2R trainees, and they aim to award outstanding and active trainees across not only D2R's priority disease areas, but also foundational axes. So we're really trying to encourage bringing trainees together through the Scholar Awards from different research disciplines across McGill and D2R's partnered institutions. And so trainees through both of these financial support mechanisms are expected to participate in the D2R training program, which I'll outline in a second, as well as I wanted to highlight here that D2R's training program events are open to all trainees within the D2R community. So if after you watch the video today, you don't think you're currently in a place, for example, you don't think you're far enough along, or maybe you're too junior to apply, if you're, let's say, at the undergrad level, then you can certainly attend our events, and they're open to everyone, and then come build into the community and then feel like you want to apply for a future edition of the Scholar Awards. And so when I speak about the D2R training program, what that is a series of workshops organized within three main themes. And so the first theme, the Build a Base theme, houses trainings that are aimed to develop the techniques and skills to become a world-class researcher. And so some examples of these events are an orientation we ran last October for incoming trainees, as well as trainings on EDI and data science. So these are really aimed at taking trainees and teaching them how to incorporate things that are at the core of what D2R is all about. So EDI and better data science principles, and incorporate those methods into their research projects. Now, the second theme, broaden your vision, is discovering the scope of D2R and integrating into the D2R community. So this is really aimed at taking a step back from that first research, from your own research project, which is the focus of the first theme, and working on taking a step back and incorporating yourself and learning about the broader D2R community. So some workshops that have been under that theme are research translation, collaboration workshops, as well as the recent D2R Research Symposium, which all D2R scholars are expected to participate in annually. And so finally, after these first two themes, we get to the Discover Your Path theme, which is where trainings and workshops more forward-facing, career-facing happen. So those are through biomanufacturing trainings, different workshops on research commercialization. So things kind of outside of the academic research lens kind of fit into this theme as well as we will be working to develop not only internship opportunities for D2R trainees and scholars, but also workshops and career days to showcase opportunities in the RNA therapeutics and genomics research space. So these three themes kind of provide a framework for communication of the training we're running, as well as a guide for us in terms of developing things that are aligned with the overall goals of training within D2R. And so I want to highlight here that some events within this training program, for example, the EDI training and the data science training, as well as the symposium, are mandatory for D2R scholars. And if you apply to the program and are awarded, some more details on what this means will be communicated to you at that time. And so some important information that is also, of course, available on our website on the online call for applications are that the application deadline for this year's awards are June 15th. 2026, which is a Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, with anticipated results announcement in August. And so similar to last year, the same as last year, the master's awards are $27,000 for 1 year, and these are non-renewable awards, while the doctoral awards are $40,000 per year for 2 years, with the possibility to renew for 1 additional year if you are able to demonstrate research progress and are actively involved in the D2R training program and other training related elements. For example, we have a trainee committee or EDI communities of practice for trainees. So there's plenty of ways to get involved, and those are the sort of things we're going to be looking at when it is decided who can get access to that for 3rd year renewal for the doctoral awards. And so in terms of some select eligibility requirements that I'll highlight here, As I've mentioned, your proposed research must be aligned with the overall goals of D2R, including D2R's priority disease areas, and has clear alignment with at least one of D2R's foundational axes. So importantly, when on the application form and within your application components that I'll highlight in a few minutes, you're asked to specify which axes that you're most well aligned with and which priority disease area you're most well aligned with. And this will also be used to guide us in our assignment of your application to evaluators and within evaluation groups. So this important information is very important to keep consistent across your application. Additionally, at the time of application, you must have a designated supervisor at McGill or at a D2R partner institution, being UBC, U Ottawa, Sherbrooke, and IRCM. And importantly, if you're registered and want to apply from a partner institution, you must be supervised at this institution by a D2R eligible researcher. And so if you're unsure if the person you're working for and are supervised by is D2R eligible, the first step, I suggest you ask them, as they will more than likely be aware if they're on the D2R eligible list, or reach out to us and we will be able to quickly clarify that for you. And then building on those eligibility requirements, specifically for master's applicants in this year's competition, you must either be enrolled full-time in the first year of a master's program, so Master's 1, or this is altered from last year's competition, you can be starting the first year of your program in fall 2026. And so I'll highlight this again later, but if you're starting your program in fall 2026, we do require you to already have a commitment from a supervisor, as well as ask you to include a copy of your acceptance to McGill or the institution you're studying at in your application package. In terms of doctoral applicants, at the time of application, you must be enrolled full-time within the first 3 years of a doctoral program, so PhD 1 to 3. So here you do have to have already started your degree for the doctoral award. So you have to be within the first 3 years of your program. Now, another change from last year's competition is that trainees who hold an internal or external fellowship, for example, FRQ funding for those working in Quebec, are eligible to apply for the award if the award they hold both allows for concurrent funding. So the other award must allow for you to hold concurrent awards with that first award and is of lower value than the D2R Scholar Award. So for example, this does not include people who currently have CIHR and CERC or SHRC funding because they not only don't allow for concurrent funding, but they are of the same or larger value than the Scholar Award. However, for FRQ funding or other situations that allow for concurrent funding and are of lower value than the Scholar Award, for example, here specifically FRQ doctoral awards, if successful, awardees with concurrent funding will be topped up to the value of the full D2R Scholar Award. So you'll get up to, your funding will be topped up to, through D2R funding, the $27,000 for master's and $40,000 for PhD. And you will be subject to the full expectations of D2R Scholar Award holders. So those being annual reports and attendance of trainees, just as if your full funding was coming from D2R, even though only a portion of your funding will be. And so here I'd like to highlight and suggest if you have a question about your eligibility, don't go through the whole application process and apply without knowing if you're eligible for the awards. Please email d2r.training@mcgill.ca and we will provide some details about your situation, and we will do our best to clarify for you if you're eligible. At this time, I'd like to highlight some equity, diversity, and inclusion considerations in the D2R Scholar Awards programs, as D2R has EDI at the core of everything we're trying to do, and therefore it's placed as a huge priority within this funding program as well. So because of that, all applicants must complete the D2R self-identification survey. Of course, these responses will only be viewed by a very select few people and is separate from the application form at large, so will not be viewed by the people evaluating your application. So different profs evaluating your application will not have access to this information, and in any question in the self-identification survey, if you feel like you're not comfortable answering, you can always click the response that you're not comfortable answering that question. Additionally, training and EDI offered by D2R is a core component of the training program for D2R scholars. And so this is helping you hopefully integrate EDI into your research design and maybe if you stay in the research space into your research practice. We welcome and strongly encourage applications from equity deserving groups. And additionally, applicants are encouraged to signal any leave that may have affected their productivity. And so this is in an optional disclosure of leave or extending circumstances document that I'll mention in a little bit. Additionally, persons with disabilities that may need accommodation during the application process, please feel free and comfortable to reach out to the D2R office. So at that d2r.training@mcgill.ca email, in confidence, and we will aim to provide the accommodations that we can for you. Additionally, I wanted to mention that all expert evaluators will receive guidance to ensure the equitable evaluation of all applications. And so now that we're through the kind of facts, and again, this is kind of a summary of what's available on the online call for applications, I wanted to provide some guidance on preparing your application that isn't necessarily available on our website. And so well, this information is the application includes an online application form. Then in that online application form, you will have to confirm that you've completed the D2R self-identification survey that you can access through either the call for applications that's online or through the online form itself. And then there are several documents to upload, and the format requirements and the size limitations and the other descriptions of requirements are all available on the call for applications on the D2R website. And so those documents that I'll walk you through each of them over the coming slides are the research proposal, the letter of motivation, the biosketch, a copy of your transcripts and CGPA, the declaration form, and an optional explanation of leave, interruption, and or other personal circumstances. So that last document is only if you feel like you want to disclose to the evaluators of your application maybe a gap on your biosketch or another extenuating circumstance that may have impacted your academic success. So I wanted to mention that once you have the documents prepared, completing the application form will take approximately 10 to 15 minutes. So please don't start the application form 5 minutes before the deadline because I don't think you'll be able to get all the application components completed in time. And so now I'm going to walk you through briefly all elements or all documents that you have to submit with your application. So the first is the research proposal, which covers 50% of the evaluation of your application. And so for the research proposal, the master's proposal has to be 1 page max, and the doctoral 2 pages, with, in both cases, references can potentially appear on an additional page. So that means like master's, you have all the required elements on 1 page, and then the references on a 2nd page. And the doctoral, the same thing, 2 pages of text, and references can be on a 3rd page. Within the research proposal, there are several required subsections. The first of which is the background and rationale, where you're intended to provide context to the reviewer about why your research project is important, because it's you having to convince the reviewer about why is your project worth funding, is your project relevant and important. So first, we suggest that you outline what is known in the field that's relevant to your project, and then what is not known that you want to learn to kind of set up the importance of your research project. And so the reviewers will be professors within the D2R community, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily aware of all the specific information that's critical for them to understand the importance of your project. So that's up to you to communicate to them. And so you also have to communicate why is learning what you aim to learn through your project important, and why are you and your research group ideally suited to study this problem. So this is kind of setting up why, like maybe your lab discovered the biomarker that you're now trying to find a target, a therapeutic for example. And this kind of step about why your group is ideally suited to study this problem is also now an element of the letter of motivation that I'll get to in a few slides. And importantly, here is where it's very important to cite important references in your field throughout this section to provide the opportunity for reviewers to understand that you've done your work and you understand the background of your field, as well as providing resources for them if they'd like to learn. And so the next section of the research proposal is the research plan and methods. So what are the objectives of your project and how will you achieve them? And so this part is very important, and I'll emphasize this in a couple minutes as well, to clearly organize so that it's easy to follow for the reviewer. So you want to outline your research objectives, explaining how each objective contributes to the overall project, as well as organize it in a logical order and use visuals where appropriate. So use visuals if you feel they can help communicate something you're trying to communicate in your research plan and methods. It's important to clearly communicate for each objective what methods you will employ and why is that method well suited to achieve these goals. So that's why the research plan and method sections we've grouped together is to give you the opportunity to say, this is the objective and this is how I'm going to study it and this is why. Really outline for a reviewer who might not be familiar with your field, why are you doing what you're doing? And then it's important to ensure that this entire section is cohesive and easy to follow. Then the last section of the research proposal, other than the references, is the D2R alignment section. And this is where it's very important for you to explain to the reviewer how the project not only aligns with D2R and D2R's overall goals, but also is linked with a priority disease area and a foundational axis or axes. Because as I've mentioned earlier, a clear link is required for funding. So it's up to you to communicate to the reviewer how is your project aligned with, for example, Axis 5, data science axis. Why is your project aligned with that? So it doesn't do you any favors to say your project is aligned with all 6 D2R axes if you can't back that up. Really think about how to describe the alignment of your project with a priority disease area and the foundational axes. Now, the second document that I'll highlight here that's worth 25% of the evaluation is the letter of motivation. And so the Scholar Awards are designed for trainees who are engaged in D2R aligned research and who want to take advantage of the training program while also being active members of the community. So that's kind of the idea behind the letter of motivation, is trying to not only with the research proposal that you're working on a D2R aligned project, but communicate to the evaluators and the selectors, why do you want to be involved with D2R? Why are you interested in this field of research? And how do you want to be an active member of the community? And so in the letter of motivation, which if you applied last year, this year's letter of motivation is significantly different from last year's. So this year there are 2 required sections, the first being a description of the research environment. So we're asking you, and so this is still within 1 page. So it's a 1-page letter of motivation where the first step is describing why are you interested in pursuing this D2R aligned research project. So really speak back to your research proposal and then discuss in a little more detail how is the research environment you're in, how is your supervision, and how is the training you plan to take part in, potentially through D2R or otherwise, ideally suited for the successful completion of this project. So why is your lab the best place to do this research? Why are you interested in pursuing this D2R aligned work, and how do you plan to ensure the success of this project? The second required section is the training motivation section. So here it's about how will you take advantage of the enriched educational environment of D2R to pursue stuff that is kind of outside of your research project. So why do you want to be involved within D2R2, and how will that help you pursue your career goals? And how would you like to contribute to the growing D2R training community? So if you've already been taking part in D2R events, this is the place to kind of highlight that and say what you've enjoyed and how you'd like to build on that. And if you haven't already, take a look at our, for example, past issues of our D2R training newsletter or our social media or YouTube channel to kind of see the type of trainings we're doing and how would you like to be part of that growing D2R training community. Would you like to attend the symposium? Would you like to attend certain workshops? Would you like to join the training committee? And it's important here for you to specifically specify your career goals and directly link those career goals with training and development you'd like to take part in as a member of the D2R trainee community. And so the last evaluated component of the application, which is also worth 25%, is your bio sketch and your transcripts. So in terms of the bio sketch, you must follow the provided template, which is accessible through the application form and the call for applications on the D2R website. And here we encourage you to include efforts you have made to communicate your research outside of academic journals. So we don't want it to just be an academic CV. We want you to talk about your presentations, articles, other ways you've communicated research, as well as things like community outreach and non-academic achievements that you feel are relevant for your candidacy for the D2R Scholar Awards. And additionally, you must submit your official transcripts as one PDF. So this, because of the limitations on your application form, I suggest you look at the size of document limitations on the application form before preparing your documents, as this official transcript document might have to be compressed to fit the requirements. But this is just something that's a limitation of the web forms that we're using. And so for applicants, I'd like to highlight here, as I mentioned earlier, for applicants entering the first year of your master's program in fall 2026, this is where you should attach, and you must attach, a proof of acceptance to McGill or a D2R partner institution within your official transcripts. And of course, you are demonstrating to us that you have a supervisor, as the supervisor will be required to sign the declaration form that is also a required document during the application process. So at this point, I'd like to take a step back and highlight not only images of several D2R scholars that were part of last year's cohort, but wanted to highlight that a D2R scholar is someone who's currently working on or will be working on a research project that's aligned with D2R, who has a strong academic record and wants to be active members of the D2R community, and who's interested in learning about RNA therapeutics and genomic medicine in a larger context. For example, wants to take a more social science lens on their project. Think about the ethical questions, maybe bridge outside of academia and think about how things would be done from an industry perspective, as well as someone who's visualizing and planning their future career. And if this is you, and if you feel like this describes yourself or someone you want to become, please apply to the D2R Masters and Doctoral Scholar Awards program by June 15th. And if you apply and you're very excited to participate, but you're not awarded in this year's competition, please remember that the D2R training program is open to everyone. So sign up for our events, sign up for our newsletter, come to our events. They're open to all. And so at this point, I wanted to again highlight that you should go to mcgill.ca/D2R while preparing your application to learn more, as well as if you scan the QR code here, or you probably got to the video that you're watching now through the call for applications as well. But I suggest you read through the eligibility requirements, the required alignment with D2R, reach out to D2R training at mcgill.ca if you have any questions at all. And so thank you for watching this video. I look forward to hearing your questions. If we have a lot of similar questions, we might create an FAQ section on the online call, but please lay out specific elements of your eligibility in order to get the best answer. And I hope that after today's video, you're excited to apply for the Scholar Awards. Thanks a lot.